Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're talking about a scenario where, honestly, absolute precision is your only option. We're going to do a flawless, zero-deviation walkthrough of the Bombardier Q400 ground APU fire procedure. Think of this explainer not just as an overview, but as a high-stakes instruction manual. You know, in aviation emergencies, there's just no room for improvisation. Following the exact sequence of events is literally the definitive line between a contained incident and a total disaster. So lock in, because we're going step by step through the manual.
We'll be following a strict chronological checklist today covering 6 specific phases. 1. APU fire identification. 2. Automatic shutdown response. 3. Emergency communications protocol. 4. Post-APU shutdown checklist. 5. Evacuation memory items. And 6. Initiating aircraft evacuation.
Section 1. APU Fire Identification.
Okay, let's dive into this. Before we even glance at the instruments, we need to know where the inciting incident is actually happening. The Auxiliary Power Unit, or APU, is located all the way back at the tail of the Bombardier Q400. Understanding this physical location is absolutely crucial because it establishes the scope of the whole incident. A fire here is at the extreme rear of the aircraft, completely out of sight from the cockpit where you're sitting. That means we are entirely reliant on our instrumentation to tell us what's happening behind us.
And here is the unit itself. The APU is this remarkable, highly complex turbine engine that provides power and bleed air to the aircraft while it's sitting on the ground. It's a real workhorse, a critical piece of machinery. But, like any engine dealing with fuel and combustion, it carries a very real fire risk. So, now that we know what's burning and exactly where it is, let's jump into the cockpit to see what the flight crew experiences the millisecond this emergency kicks off.
Identification starts instantly, and it's basically a multi-sensory alert system. The moment a fire is detected back in the tail, the flight crew gets hit with 2 specific visual cues at the exact same time. The check fire detect warning light illuminates in stark red, right alongside the amber APU caution light. This dual illumination is essentially the aircraft tapping the crew on the shoulder, demanding immediate attention to the fire detection system.
But the final absolute identifier in this first sequence is this: the APU fire advisory light fully illuminating in bright red. Once you see this, there's no way around it. The ambiguity is completely gone. The situation is confirmed. You have an APU fire on the ground. Identification is complete, and the crew has to immediately shift into containment mode.
Section 2. Automatic shutdown response. Now, the Q400 systems are smart. They'll immediately attempt an automatic shutdown. But in aviation, we never just trust, right? We verify. The crew has to actively scan and confirm 4 specific light changes to verify this shutdown actually happened. First, the APU run advisory light has to go out. Then 3 very specific lights must illuminate: the APU bottle low, the APU fuel valve closed, and the APU fail advisory lights. If you see all of these, great, the aircraft has successfully deployed its initial self-defense measures.
But here's the kicker. What happens if that automatic system fails? Well, the manual dictates a strict 7-second rule. The crew watches the APU bottle arm or APU fire advisory lights on the fire protection panel. If those lights are still on after 7 seconds, manual intervention is absolutely required. The crew has to pull the guard down, push the extinguish switch right there in the center, and actively verify that the bottle arm and fire advisory lights go out. You are manually firing the extinguisher right into the APU compartment.
Section 3. Emergency Communications Protocol.
At this exact moment, roles divide to maximize efficiency. While the captain instantly informs ground control about the APU fire, the first officer gets on the radio to air traffic control with this exact distress call: Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. SG-123, APU fire, evacuating bay number 123, fuel on board 3 tons, POB 90, no dangerous goods, emergency equipment required. Notice the absolute density of critical information there. In literally one breath, ATC knows the nature of the emergency, the exact location, the fuel hazard, the number of souls on board, and exactly what equipment to send.
Following that transmission, the internal flight deck communication protocol takes over. The pilot in the left-hand seat, the captain, formally calls out APU fire checklist. This verbal command is critical. It's the formal trigger for the pilot in the right-hand seat to execute the detailed mechanical steps of the APU fire checklist, which is followed immediately by the post-APU automatic shutdown checklist.
Section 4. Post-APU shutdown checklist. Now, what's really interesting about the APU control panel is how its physical layout maps perfectly to the sequence of our next 3 manual steps. Look at the buttons from right to left: BL Air, Gen, and PWR. This is exactly the order the crew will systematically disable these connections to fully isolate the burning unit back at the tail. It's like a giant puzzle where everything has to fit perfectly.
Let's see how this builds. Step 1. Push the APU bleed air switch to off and make sure the bleed air open advisory light goes out. We're cutting off the air circulation. Step 2. Push the APU gen switch to off and verify the gen on light goes off. Now we're cutting electrical generation. Step 3. Push the APU power switch to off. Here, you must verify the APU caution light and APU fuel valve open advisory light go out. And most importantly, you absolutely must confirm that the APU fuel valve closed advisory light illuminates. This confirms the fuel supply to the fire is officially cut.
And this brings us to a massive safety caution straight from the manual. It explicitly states, "Caution, do not restart the APU following an automatic shutdown if the fire advisory light is illuminated." Under the immense pressure of an emergency, human instinct might be to try and just, reset the systems. This caution is a hard-line rule to prevent pumping fresh fuel and a spark back into an active fire zone.
Section 5. Evacuation Memory Items.
Okay, things are moving fast now. These 4 sequence-dependent actions must happen swiftly from memory. First, emergency brake on. The aircraft absolutely cannot move during an evacuation. Second, move both power levers to the disk detent. Third, move both condition levers to fuel off. And finally, pull both the fuel and hydraulic off handles. After pulling those handles, the crew must immediately check that the fuel valve closed and hydraulic valve closed white advisory lights illuminate. You are completely shutting the aircraft's vital fluids down.
Section 6. Initiating aircraft evacuation.
Before giving the final shout to evacuate, the flight crew has to signal the cabin. They turn the emergency lights on. This specifically gets the cabin crew's attention, warning them to be ready. Next, they turn the seatbelt sign off. This is the visual signal that passengers are now safe to get up from their seats. Then, for the critical passenger announcement, they set the ARCDU to PA, press the PA button, and ensure the green light is lit up. The microphone is live.
Over the PA system, the captain shouts the final unmistakable command: "Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate." Crucially, the command must explicitly state either left side or right side, whichever side the crew has determined is actually safe and away from the APU fire hazard at the tail.
Even as passengers start moving, the flight deck still has final actions to take. The ARCDU is set back to VHF. The first officer immediately leaves the flight compartment to help with the evacuation back in the cabin. The remaining crew member rapidly powers down the aircraft. AC external, DC external power, APU, and battery master are all switched to off. The aircraft is dead. Finally, the rest of the flight crew leaves the cockpit to go and assist in the evacuation.
So, I leave you with this thought as we look at the sheer complexity of what we've just covered. Could you execute this exact sequence flawlessly from memory under the extreme pressure of an active fire? Every light verified, every switch flipped in perfect sequence. In aviation, the checklist isn't just a suggestion, it's the absolute architecture of survival. Memorize it, respect it, and never deviate. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the Q400 emergency procedures. Stay focused and keep learning.